I still remember the sound that night, the soft creak of the front door closing, and the quiet that followed after. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was final. That's the part that stays with me the most, not the argument, not the tears, but that calm, heavy silence after he walked away. My husband, Robert, had always been a man of few words, but that night, even his silence felt like a goodbye. We had been married for 42 years. We had seen storms before, financial worries, health scares, the chaos of raising children. But through it all, I believed in one thing, that family was unbreakable. Until that night. When we needed him the most, he closed the door behind him. I sat on the old couch for hours, the one by the living room window, watching the porch light flicker against the fog. It felt like time had stopped, like the world was still moving outside, but inside our little home, everything had gone quiet. Our son, Mark, was upstairs, still weak from his accident. I had been caring for him since the day they brought him home from the hospital. The doctors said recovery would take time. Robert, he couldn't handle the waiting. Or maybe he couldn't handle watching our boy like that, half of who he used to be. I told myself he just needed space. That maybe he'd come back when the morning light touched our porch again. But morning came, and the chair where he used to sit was still empty. Days turned into weeks. And the smell of his coffee, the one he brewed too strong every morning, faded from the kitchen. That's how loss begins, you know? Not with one big heartbreak, but with little absences. A cup left untouched. A light switch that's never flipped on. The sound of footsteps that never return. People told me to move on. To forgive. To find peace. But how do you forgive someone who closed the door on you when the world was already falling apart? Still, life has a way of softening even the hardest memories. And over time, I began to see something I couldn't before, that maybe his leaving wasn't about abandoning us, but about running from his own pain. It took me years to understand that. And even longer to say it out loud. I met Robert in the spring of 1976. Our small town was just beginning to bloom again after a long, stubborn winter. He worked at the hardware store back then, tall, quiet, always with a little smudge of sawdust on his shirt. I used to see him through the window of my father's bakery, his hand steady as he carried lumber to his truck. He wasn't the type of man who talked much, but when he smiled, it was like the whole world stopped pretending to be complicated. We married 2 years later in the little white church on Maple Street. It was a modest wedding, lilacs from my mother's garden, a cake baked by Aunt May, and the same string lights that hung in every town event. I remember thinking, this is what forever feels like. A hand to hold, a home to build, a future to trust. Our first home was small, 1 bedroom, a squeaky porch, and a backyard where the grass never grew right. But it was ours. Robert painted the walls cream, I sewed the curtains myself. Every evening, he'd sit by the radio while I made supper, tapping his fingers to old country songs. We didn't have much, but we had laughter, and in those days, laughter felt like wealth. Then came Mark, our only son. He was born on a quiet morning in June, sunlight pouring through the hospital blinds. I still remember the way Robert held him, awkwardly at first, then with this tenderness that made me fall in love all over again. For years, that boy was the center of our world. Robert built him a wooden cradle, a toy chest, even a small swing under the oak tree. He used to push Mark for hours while I watched from the kitchen window, the sound of their laughter echoing through the yard. We were a simple family. Sunday church, Friday grocery trips, and summer barbecues with our neighbors. Our home wasn't perfect, but it was full of noise, warmth, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be said out loud. But as years went by, life started to quiet down. Mark grew into a teenager, curious, restless, always wanting to explore beyond our little town. Robert became more withdrawn. He wasn't unkind, just quieter. Some evenings, I'd find him sitting on the porch, staring out into the dark, the old radio humming softly beside him. When I asked what he was thinking, he'd just shake his head and say, "Nothing important, Ellen. Just life." Looking back now, I think that was when I first felt the distance growing between us. Not because of anger, but because silence has a way of building walls higher than words ever could. Then came the accident. It was just after Mark's 27th birthday. He was driving home from work late one rainy night. A truck ran a red light. I still remember the phone call, the way the nurse's voice trembled when she said, "critical condition." Everything after that was a blur: sirens, hospital halls, cold waiting chairs. Mark survived, thank God. But the accident left him different. His legs were weak. His memory would fade in and out. And sometimes, he'd wake up confused, calling for people who weren't there anymore. We brought him home after 3 months. The doctors said recovery was possible, but slow. I promised myself I'd care for him, no matter how long it took. Robert agreed, but I could see the strain in his eyes. He wasn't used to helplessness, not in himself, not in the people he loved. Our days became a routine of quiet caregiving. Morning pills, soft meals, gentle reminders. Mark would smile some days, frustrated others. I'd sit beside him, humming old lullabies from when he was a boy, trying to fill the silence with something familiar. But Robert. He started leaving the house more often. At first, just for walks. Then for hours. Then whole evenings. I told myself he needed air, that men grieve differently, that he just needed time to find his footing. But some nights, I'd wake to an empty bed and the cold space beside me felt like another wound I couldn't mend. Still, I waited. I made his coffee every morning, even when he didn't come down for breakfast. I set his plate at dinner, even when he didn't sit at the table. Because love, at least the kind I believed in, was something you showed even when it wasn't returned right away. The neighbors started to notice. Mrs. Callahan from across the street once said, "Ellen, you can't pour from an empty cup, dear." But how do you stop pouring when it's your family that's thirsty? One evening, Mark was having a difficult day. He tried to walk by himself and fell near the kitchen doorway. I ran to help him up, but Robert just stood there, frozen. For a long time, he didn't move. Then he turned away, went to the porch, and lit a cigarette. That was the first time I saw tears in his eyes. But he didn't say a word. That night, after Mark had fallen asleep, I sat beside Robert. The porch light flickered against his tired face. "Robert," I whispered, "we'll get through this. Together." He didn't look at me. He just said softly, "I don't know if I can, Ellen." That was the beginning of the end. The moment when love started slipping quietly through the cracks. The house had grown quieter. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that presses on your chest until you start listening for sounds that aren't there. Every morning, I'd still make breakfast. Toast, eggs, and coffee the way Robert liked it. But most days, the plate would go untouched. I'd hear the back door creak instead, the same way it always did when he slipped out early, before the sun even had a chance to rise. At first, I told myself it was his way of coping. Some men fix cars. Some bury themselves in work. Robert went walking. Miles and miles, until even the dogs in the neighborhood stopped barking when he passed by. But as the weeks turned into months, the walks became something else. Longer. Later. Colder. And when he came back, he didn't smell like sawdust or rain anymore. He smelled like distance, that faint scent of unfamiliar air that doesn't belong to your home. Mark's recovery was slow. The doctors said progress would come in waves. Some days, he'd smile again, remembering old jokes or asking about his friends. Other days, he'd stare blankly at the wall, lost somewhere I couldn't reach. I tried to stay strong. Tried to fill every silence with love, with songs, with warm food, with hope. But love, I've learned, doesn't always echo back the way you send it out. Sometimes it gets swallowed by the walls. Robert had started fixing things that didn't need fixing. The porch railing. The fence. Even the hinges on the shed door. One evening, I brought him lemonade and said softly, "You've been out here all day." He didn't look up from his hammer. "I like the quiet," he said. But I could tell, it wasn't peace he was chasing. It was escape. The first argument came one night after dinner. Mark had spilled his soup, nothing major, just a small accident. But Robert's hand slammed against the table, startling both of us. "For God's sake, Ellen," he snapped, "he can't even hold a spoon right." I froze. Mark looked at his father with this mixture of confusion and shame that broke me in half. "Robert," I said, "it's not his fault, I know it's not," he shouted, standing up so suddenly his chair toppled backward. Then, quieter, I can't do this anymore." He left the room. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house, long after his footsteps faded away. That night, I sat by Mark's bed until he fell asleep. Then I cried, not for the anger, but for the emptiness that had taken its place. Over the next few weeks, Robert stopped coming home for dinner. Sometimes, he wouldn't come home at all. He'd leave a note on the counter, "Staying at the shop, don't wait up," or just nothing at all. Neighbors started to whisper. Mrs. Callahan asked if everything was all right. I smiled and said, "We're managing." Because what else could I say? That love was slipping through my fingers like sand. I still remember the night I found the envelope. It was tucked between the bills on his desk, a letter from a woman named Marie. The handwriting was soft, feminine, looping with care. It wasn't what you think, not exactly. No words of romance, no declarations. Just small things, "Hope you're sleeping better. The lake was quiet today." Sometimes healing means walking away. I didn't confront him that night. I just sat there, holding that letter like it was a piece of glass, fragile and dangerous all at once. Because part of me already knew the truth. Not that he was unfaithful, but that he had already left me in his heart. One evening, Mark asked, "Mom, is Dad mad at me?" The question hit harder than anything Robert had ever said. I forced a smile. "No, sweetheart. He's just tired." But inside, I wanted to scream, "Yes, he's angry. Not at you, but at life. At fate. At everything he can't fix." Robert came home late that night, smelling faintly of cigarettes and lake air. I waited for him in the kitchen. When he walked in, I said quietly, "She's been writing to you." He froze. For a moment, the only sound was the old clock ticking on the wall. Then he said, "She's just a friend." "Do friends tell you to walk away from your life?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just looked at me, not with guilt, not with anger, but with that hollow kind of sadness that means a person has already left, even if their body hasn't. He turned to go upstairs, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't follow. The next morning, he was gone. No note. No goodbye. Just the faint smell of his cologne on the pillow and an empty space in the closet where his shirts used to hang. Mark asked where he went. I told him he needed some time to think. But I knew. He wasn't thinking. He was leaving. Days turned into weeks. I found small reminders of him everywhere, a screwdriver left on the porch, an old mug in the sink, his handwriting on the grocery list. Each one felt like a ghost refusing to leave quietly. I spent my nights by Mark's side, listening to the hum of the oxygen machine, praying he wouldn't notice how much smaller the house felt. Some nights I'd whisper, "Your father loves you," just so he'd have something kind to fall asleep to. But love spoken in the dark feels different when you're the only one saying it. Then, one day, Robert returned. It was early morning, the air crisp, the sky pale blue. I was feeding the birds in the yard when I heard the gate creak open. There he was, thinner, older somehow, his eyes tired. He said nothing at first. Just looked at me like a man standing before the ruins of something he built with his own hands. "I didn't mean to stay away so long," he said finally. I nodded, unsure whether to feel relief or ache. Mark was inside, still asleep. I told Robert he could come in, but he shook his head. "Not yet. I just wanted to see you." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind rustled the old oak leaves. Then he said softly, "I thought leaving would make it easier." It didn't. Something in his voice cracked. And for the first time in months, I saw the man I married, not the stranger who walked away. But before I could speak, he added, "I don't know how to come back." And that was the cruelest part, because neither did I. That night, I sat beside Mark, watching him sleep. Outside, the porch light flickered again, just like it used to when Robert came home late. Except this time, he didn't walk through the door. For the first time, I allowed myself to whisper the truth: he's not coming back. Not really. The words hung heavy in the dark, but somehow, saying them made the silence a little less sharp. It was late autumn when everything changed. The trees had turned to gold and rust, the kind of beauty that feels almost cruel. How the world can look so alive when your heart feels anything but. Mark had been doing better, little by little. He could walk short distances now, with a cane, and sometimes he'd smile while watching the birds through the window. I clung to those moments like life rafts. But Robert's absence still hung over everything, a quiet shadow that touched even our brightest days. He'd stopped calling months ago. At first, he'd text a few words, "How's Mark?" or "You holding up?" Then the messages stopped coming altogether. The last one was simple: "I need to figure things out." That was 8 months ago. One morning, a letter arrived. It wasn't from Robert, at least not at first glance. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, the kind that comes from law offices. My hands trembled as I opened it, half fearing, half knowing. Inside was a single page, with his handwriting scrawled across the bottom. He'd written his own goodbye. Formal, polite, detached. He wanted a divorce. I read the letter 3 times before I could breathe. Not because I didn't understand the words, but because I couldn't understand him. The man who once held my hand through every storm now asking to walk alone. Mark was in the next room, humming softly to himself. I folded the paper and placed it inside the drawer beneath the old radio. I didn't cry, not then. The tears came later, when I was doing something as ordinary as folding laundry. One of his old flannel shirts was still in the basket, the one he used to wear when fixing things. I pressed it to my face, and it smelled faintly of sawdust and lake wind. That's when it hit me, not the loss of a marriage, but the realization that he wasn't coming back to the same version of me he had left. Days turned colder. The mornings came slower. Mark asked fewer questions about his father. Maybe he sensed the truth. Children often do, even when we try to protect them from it. Then one evening, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was soft, almost hesitant. "Mrs. Harding?" "Yes. This is Marie. I'm a friend of Robert's." The name hit like ice water. She continued gently, "I thought you should know. Robert's been in the hospital. There was an accident, a heart attack. He asked for you." For a moment, the world went silent, no clock ticking, no birds outside, not even my own breath. Then everything rushed back at once. I asked which hospital. She told me. It was 2 towns over. I left Mark with our neighbor and drove there in the dark, hands gripping the wheels so tightly I could feel my pulse through the leather. When I reached the hospital, the nurse led me through a maze of quiet halls. The smell of antiseptic and cold air filled my lungs. And then, there he was, Robert. Pale. Still. Smaller than I remembered. The machines around him hummed softly, each beep like a faint echo of the life we once shared. Marie was sitting beside him. She looked up when I entered, not defensive, not guilty, just sad. "I called you," she whispered. He wanted to see you." I nodded, too numb to speak. She stood and gently touched his hand before leaving the room. Now it was just me and him. I sat down slowly, my eyes tracing every line of his face. He looked peaceful, like someone finally too tired to run. When his eyes fluttered open, he smiled faintly. "Ellen," I swallowed hard. "I'm here, I didn't think you'd come." I almost didn't. We both let out a soft, broken laugh, the kind that comes when you realize words can't fix what's already gone. He whispered, "I made so many mistakes." I took his hand, cold, weak, trembling, and said quietly, "So did I." For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if silence had become its own language. "Finally," he said, "I kept thinking leaving would make it easier for you, for Mark. I didn't know it would make everything harder." I blinked back tears. "Why didn't you just come home?" He looked at me then, really looked, and said, "Because I didn't think I deserved home anymore." The heart monitor beeped softly beside us, steady but fragile. I could feel time slipping through the cracks of that room. So I said the only thing that felt true: "I forgave you long before you asked." He closed his eyes, a small tear sliding down his cheek. "I'm sorry, Ellen," he whispered. "For everything." "I know," I said. And then, in the quietest voice, I added, "You can rest now." He passed that night. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just softly, like a candle burning out after a long storm. The nurse touched my shoulder gently and whispered, "He went peacefully." But peace felt too big a word for what I felt. It wasn't peace. It was emptiness, and in that emptiness, a strange sense of relief. I stayed in the room long after they took him away. Marie came back, standing by the door. She was crying. "I didn't mean to," she began, but I stopped her. "You helped him," I said. "And for that, I'm grateful." It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was something quieter, the understanding that pain sometimes brings strangers together. When I returned home, the house felt different. Not heavier. Not lighter. Just real. As if it finally accepted what had happened. Mark was sitting at the table, waiting for me. His eyes searched mine, and he asked softly, "Is Dad coming home?" I shook my head. He didn't cry. He just nodded, then whispered, "I think he's happy now." And somehow, I believed him. That night, after Mark went to sleep, I walked out to the porch. The air was cold, the kind that seeps into your bones. I sat there for a long time, staring at the stars, tiny dots of light scattered across endless dark. I whispered to the night, "Goodbye, Robert," and for the first time I didn't expect an answer. But the wind moved through the trees, soft and warm, like a hand brushing my shoulder. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days after the funeral passed in a blur. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles wrapped in foil and polite words like, "So sorry for your loss." The house filled with voices and then emptied again, leaving only silence, the kind that hums in the corners after everyone leaves. I found myself doing small, ordinary things to fill the emptiness. Washing dishes that didn't need washing. Rearranging the same stack of books. Listening to the old clock tick as if its rhythm could hold me together. Grief, I realized, isn't loud. It's quiet. It sneaks into your mornings, your coffee breaks, the sound of the wind through the curtains. It's not the crying that hurts the most, it's the moments when you don't cry. When you just sit there, knowing someone is gone, and the world still moves on. Mark was the reason I kept moving. He needed routine. He needed warmth. And truthfully, so did I. We built new habits, small ones that felt safe. Every morning, I'd make him oatmeal, and he'd hum his favorite tune while sitting by the window. Sometimes, he'd point outside and say, "Look, Mom, the world's still here." And I'd smile, because he was right. We visited the lake one afternoon, the same one Robert used to take us to. It was still, quiet, and cold. Mark threw small stones into the water, watching the ripples spread and fade. He turned to me and said, "Do you think Dad can see us?" I thought for a moment before answering, "I think he can feel us." And maybe that's even better. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Robert, but to myself. I wrote about all the things I wished I had said, all the love I didn't express when I had the chance. Then I folded it neatly and tucked it into the pages of our wedding album. It wasn't closure. It was acknowledgement, a quiet way of saying, "I remember, but I release." The hardest part of healing was learning how to love the house again. For months, every creak of the floorboards sounded like his footsteps, every shadow felt like his presence. But slowly, the house began to soften. Sunlight found new places to rest. Mark's laughter filled the rooms again. And one morning, as I was making tea, I caught myself humming. It startled me, that small, simple act of peace. That afternoon, I decided to fix the garden. The weeds had taken over since last summer, curling around the old fence posts. I knelt down with my gloves and shears, cutting, digging, breathing. There was something deeply healing about the dirt beneath my fingers, the smell of earth, the sound of life continuing quietly. By the time I was done, the garden looked bare but alive. New beginnings always do. A few weeks later, Marie came by, the woman who had called me from the hospital. I hadn't expected her to reach out again, but when she did, I said yes. We sat on the porch together, the air cool and still. She was nervous, fidgeting with her hands. I didn't want to intrude, she said softly. But I thought, maybe we could talk. I nodded. There was a time when I might have felt anger, or jealousy, or bitterness. But sitting there beside her, I felt none of that. Only understanding. She told me how Robert had talked about us, about Mark, about me. She said he carried guilt like a second skin, but he also carried love. He always said you were his home, she whispered. Her words caught in the air, fragile as autumn leaves. I didn't cry, I just reached over and placed my hand on hers. I know, I said, and for the first time, I really did. Forgiveness didn't come in a grand moment, it came in that small gesture, two women sitting in quiet empathy, bound by loss and memory. Life moved forward in slow, tender steps. Winter passed, and spring arrived with soft green buds on the trees. Mark started painting again, something he hadn't done since before his father left. He painted the lake, the garden, our little porch. Each one was brighter than the last. One morning, I asked him what made him choose those colors, warm yellows, gentle blues. He smiled and said, because you told me light always finds a way. His words stayed with me. That afternoon, I went through Robert's old things. Not to dwell, but to let go. I kept a few items, his flannel shirt, his pocket watch, and a photograph of the three of us smiling by the lake. Everything else, I packed away gently. When I closed the last box, I whispered a quiet thank you. For the love we had. For the lessons we learned. For the strength that comes from losing and still choosing to love anyway. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I made a cup of tea and sat on the porch again. The world was quiet, that rare, perfect kind of quiet that feels like peace instead of loneliness. Mark joined me, sitting close, his head resting on my shoulder. He asked, "Do you miss him?" I smiled faintly. Every day. But it doesn't hurt like it used to. He nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's because he's still here, just in a different way. I looked out over the yard, the flowers gently swaying in the breeze. I think you're right, I said softly. We sat there until the stars appeared, no words, no need. Just the sound of crickets and the warmth of shared silence. And in that moment, I realized something simple but powerful. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without breaking. Loving without holding on too tightly. And finding peace in the space where pain used to live. That night, before bed, I looked at the framed photo on my nightstand, Robert holding Mark when he was a baby, both of them laughing. For years, I couldn't look at it without feeling that sharp ache of loss. But now, I smiled. Thank you, I whispered. Not just for the years we had, but for teaching me that even after love ends, it leaves behind light. And that light, if we let it, can guide us home again. It's been 2 years now. Sometimes, I still wake up expecting to hear his footsteps in the hallway or his quiet whistle from the porch. Old habits like that don't fade, they just become memories wearing softer edges. The house feels different now. It's not the hollow kind of quiet anymore. It's gentle. Like the house itself learned how to breathe again, slowly and deeply. I spend my mornings by the kitchen window, watching the sun stretch across the lawn. The same light that once felt too bright now feels like a companion. I make my tea, hum softly, and whisper a little thank you to the morning air. Because even though life has taken so much, it still gives, in small, quiet ways. Mark visits often. Sometimes he brings his own children now, little hands that run through my garden, laughter echoing through these once lonely rooms. When I see them play, I can't help but smile. The same home that held my heartbreak now holds new beginnings. One afternoon, my granddaughter, Lily, asked me, "Grandma, do you ever get sad about Grandpa?" I paused for a moment, feeling that familiar ache, the one that never really goes away. Then I smiled and said, "Yes, sweetheart. But sadness doesn't mean you stop loving. It just means your heart remembers." She thought about that for a moment, then said, "Then I hope I always remember." Her innocence broke something open in me, a tenderness I didn't know still existed. I've learned something about love. It doesn't end when someone leaves, or when time passes. Love just changes shape. It becomes quieter, softer. It settles into the corners of your days, the smell of morning coffee, the sound of rain, the feeling of sunlight on your hands. And forgiveness, that comes even slower. But when it does, it doesn't erase the past. It redeems it. It gives meaning to the pain and turns grief into gratitude. For a long time, I blamed myself, for what went wrong, for what I didn't say, for what I couldn't fix. But now, I see that we were all just doing our best with the love we had and the time we were given. And sometimes, that has to be enough. One evening not long ago, I took out the old photo albums. Mark was here, helping me clean the attic. He found our wedding picture, me in my simple white dress, Robert smiling like the world couldn't touch him. Mark laughed softly. "You two look like you believed love could fix everything." I looked at that picture for a long time and said, maybe it didn't fix everything. But it made everything worth it. He nodded, and for a moment, we both just looked, not at the loss, but at the life between the lines of that old photo. That's the thing about endings. They're not really endings at all. They're just new beginnings we don't recognize yet. Tonight, the air is cool. The crickets sing softly outside my window. I sit in my favorite chair with a blanket wrapped around me, a cup of tea warming my hands. On the table beside me, a single candle flickers, steady and calm. I think about Robert, about how much we loved, how much we hurt, how much we grew. And I think about the woman I used to be, scared, angry, lost. Now, I see her with kindness. She did what she could. She survived. And she found peace where pain used to live. If he were here, I think I'd tell him one thing: you were right. I always had you, not in presence, but in memory. And that's enough. Maybe that's what healing truly is, not erasing what was broken, but learning to live beautifully beside the cracks. Because life, for all its heartbreak, always gives us another sunrise. And love, even when it ends, always leaves light behind.